My son stole $500,000 from me. Those were the first words that came out of my mouth when the sheriff knocked on my door that Tuesday morning, though I hadn't planned to confess my shame to anyone. But it slipped out because my heart was raw, and my mind was spinning. He stood there with his clipboard, asking me if I knew about the foreclosure notice. I felt my throat close. My hand trembled as I clutched the doorframe for balance. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a scam. The numbers were real, the papers had my name on them, and the bank's lawyer wasn't bluffing. I owed $500,000 that I never touched, never asked for, never agreed to. My only son, my pride, my heir, the boy I raised alone after my wife Elaine passed, had signed my name, taken the loan, and left me holding the wreckage. My name is Harold Whitman. I'm 67 years old. I live in a modest house in Greenwood, Indiana, a town people only notice when they're on their way to Indianapolis. My home isn't much, 3 bedrooms, a yard that I mow myself, a garage full of tools I've collected over 40 years. But it's mine. At least, it used to be. I worked my whole life for this. Started at 16 on a farm, moved to construction, then to the auto plant. 42 years of clocking in before dawn, missing birthdays, breaking bones, and saving every dollar I could. My pension isn't large, but it's steady. Social Security pays the basics. I live simple, never wanted more. My wife used to say I had an old soul, even when I was young. She liked pretty things. She liked to host people. I just liked knowing the bills were paid, the fridge was full, and my boy could have the things I never had. Marcus. My only child. My everything. The boy I coached in Little League, the boy I taught to ride a bike on the cracked pavement of our cul-de-sac. The boy who cried at his mother's funeral when he was just 15, and I promised him through my own tears that I'd be both father and mother from that day forward. I thought I did a decent job. I paid for his college. I gave him the down payment for his first condo. I even covered his wedding expenses when Sierra's family couldn't contribute much. And still, that wasn't enough. When I first learned about Sierra, I thought she was just another young woman with big dreams. She came from a different world than ours, fancy nails, constant selfies, champagne tastes with a soda pop budget. I noticed how Marcus started dressing different, talking different, moving like he had something to prove. I figured it was love. Maybe she pushed him to be more ambitious. Maybe she made him feel like a king. But somewhere along the way, love twisted into poison. It started small. Marcus asking me for help with bills. Then Sierra asking me to co-sign for a car. Then Sierra's mother, Darlene, moving into their guest room after falling on hard times. I didn't mind helping. Family is family. But I never dreamed they'd go this far. The first sign came a month before the sheriff showed up. I got a letter from the bank about a pending verification of a loan application. I thought it was junk mail. I shredded it. 2 weeks later, another letter. This one was urgent, stamped with red ink. I called Marcus. "Son, did you take out a loan in my name?" I asked him. My voice was steady, but my heart was racing. "Dad, relax," he laughed. "It's just paperwork. Sierra and I are restructuring some stuff. You'll see, it's all for the family. Don't worry about it." He brushed it off like I was a senile old man. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that my son would never betray me. But my gut twisted. Then came the foreclosure notice. The sheriff's clipboard. The reality that I was not only broke, I was trapped. That evening, I drove to Marcus's house. It wasn't just a house. It was a palace compared to mine. A sprawling suburban property with 2 SUVs in the driveway, a pool in the backyard, and string lights glowing around the patio. The kind of place I knew my pension could never touch. Sierra opened the door. She looked me up and down like I was a delivery man. Her perfume was so strong it nearly choked me. "Oh, Harold," she said, tilting her head. "Marcus is in the den. Come in." I stepped inside and my boots sank into plush white carpet. The walls were decorated with expensive art. A chandelier sparkled overhead. I thought of the peeling wallpaper in my kitchen, the roof I patched last spring with tar and prayer. Marcus was on the leather sofa, scrolling his phone. "Dad," he said flatly, not even standing. $500,000, I said. My voice cracked. You took out $500,000 in my name. He didn't flinch. He didn't look guilty. He didn't even look surprised. Dad, calm down, he said, finally setting his phone aside. We needed it. Sierra's mom's medical bills, the renovations, the new business. Business? I interrupted. My fists clenched. What business? You work in IT. You make good money. Why in God's name would you drag me into this mess? Sierra slinked onto the couch beside him, draping her manicured hand across his chest. Harold, you don't spend money. You live like an old man stuck in the past. You should be happy to help us. We're building something. Marcus is going places. You just don't understand our world. I stared at her. The entitlement in her voice. The smug smile that told me she thought she'd won. And Marcus, my son, my flesh and blood, he didn't defend me. He didn't apologize. He just looked away, ashamed but too weak to break free of her grip. I could go to jail, I whispered. Do you understand that? Fraud. Identity theft. You didn't just take money, you stole my name. My reputation. Everything I worked for. Marcus finally stood, towering over me like I was a child. Dad, stop being dramatic. You're fine. No one's going to put a 67-year-old man in jail. Worst case, you tighten your belt a little. You don't need all that pension money anyway. Think of this as an investment in your family's future. My knees almost gave out. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. In that moment, I saw the truth as clear as daylight. Marcus wasn't the boy I raised. He was gone. Replaced by a man who valued greed over loyalty, image over love, and Sierra over me. I left without another word. Drove home in silence. My house felt colder than ever when I walked inside. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wallpaper Elaine had chosen 30 years ago. My hand wrapped around her old coffee mug, chipped at the rim but still whole. The same mug she used every morning until the cancer took her. She would have known what to do. She would have told me how to fight, or at least how to hold my head high. But all I had was silence. Silence, and the crushing weight of betrayal. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my recliner, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced. The bank wanted money I didn't have. My son wanted forgiveness I couldn't give. And Sierra, well, Sierra wanted everything. I realized then that I had two choices: let them destroy me quietly, or fight back in a way they'd never see coming. The question wasn't if I would act. The question was how far I was willing to go. I didn't sleep the night I discovered the loan. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus as a boy again, freckles on his cheeks, baseball cap too big for his head, looking up at me like I could fix anything. But when I opened my eyes, I saw the man he had become, standing tall beside Sierra, too proud to admit the wreckage he'd caused. I brewed coffee before the sun rose. The kitchen smelled the way it always did in the morning: burnt toast, black coffee, the faint memory of Elaine's lavender hand cream lingering in the air like a ghost. I sat at the table, staring at my reflection in the dark window. My hair was thinner, my shoulders slumped, but the real weight pressing me down wasn't age, it was disappointment. How had Marcus turned into this? The question gnawed at me until I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled out an old box from the closet, the one filled with photographs, report cards, and souvenirs from his childhood. Dust clung to my fingers as I lifted the lid. The first picture I found was of Marcus at age 6, holding a fishing pole by Lake Monroe. His smile was missing 2 front teeth. That day, he'd begged me to keep every tiny fish he caught, even the ones barely longer than my hand. I told him we had to throw them back, that some things had to be given up to grow. He cried, and I promised him life was about patience, that the big catch was worth waiting for. Back then, he believed every word I said. I shuffled through more memories. His first home run in Little League. The science fair ribbon he won for a project we built together in the garage. The graduation cap and gown that made me cry harder than he did. It wasn't always easy raising him alone. After Elaine died, there were nights I didn't know how to cook anything more than macaroni and cheese. Mornings I had to choose between working overtime and attending his school recital. I did what I could. Sometimes I failed. But I never stopped loving him, never stopped trying to give him the world. I remember the day he got accepted into college. He was the first Whitman to go. I sold Elaine's old jewelry to help with tuition, and when that wasn't enough, I took out a small loan. It didn't matter. His future mattered. He hugged me that day, said, "Dad, I'll make you proud." And for a while, he did. Marcus graduated with a degree in computer science. Got a job at a firm in Indianapolis. Brought home paychecks bigger than anything I'd ever seen. I thought he was set. I thought my years of sacrifice had finally paid off. Then Sierra walked into his life. I'll never forget the first time I met her. Marcus invited me to dinner at a fancy downtown restaurant. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for weddings and funerals. She arrived late, heels clicking against the tile, carrying a purse that probably cost more than my truck. Her smile was wide, but her eyes scanned me like I was a stranger she'd rather not meet. "So, this is Harold," she said, shaking my hand with fingers heavy with rings. "Marcus has told me so much." I could tell by the way she looked at Marcus that she loved what he could give her, not who he was. But love is blind, and my son was blindest of all. At first, I held my tongue. Maybe she'd change. Maybe he'd grow wiser. But the years only widened the gap between us. Flash forward to the present, and I'm sitting here, broke and betrayed, wondering where I went wrong. Around 9 that morning, I got a call from my neighbor, Agnes. She's 72, widowed, and never misses a thing happening on our street. "Harold," she said in her raspy voice, "I saw the sheriff's car outside your house yesterday. Everything okay?" I almost lied. But the truth came out before I could stop it. My son took out a loan in my name. $500,000. I could lose the house. There was silence on the line. Then she whispered, "Oh, Harold." It hurt more than I expected, telling someone else, hearing the pity in her tone. It made everything real. That afternoon, I sat in the garage, staring at my tools. Each one had a story. The hammer I used to build Marcus's treehouse, the wrench I used to fix his first car. Now they just sat there, reminders of a man who gave everything for a son who gave nothing back. But as the hours passed, anger began to stir beneath the sorrow. Not a hot, reckless anger, but something colder, steadier. The kind of anger that builds foundations. I thought back to a conversation I once had with Marcus years ago, when he was in high school. He had cheated on a math test. The teacher called me in. I was furious. "Why'd you do it?" I demanded. "Because everyone else cheats, Dad," he said. "Why shouldn't I?" "Because you're not everyone else," I told him. "You're a Whitman. And a Whitman stands on his own 2 feet. If you take shortcuts now, you'll never be able to carry the weight later." I didn't know then that those words would come back to haunt me. By evening, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I drove again to Marcus's house, this time not to beg for answers but to demand them. When I walked through the door, Sierra's mother, Darlene, was lounging on the couch in silk pajamas, sipping wine at 5 in the evening. She looked at me like I was intruding. "Harold," she drawled, "you look stressed. Maybe you should relax more. Life's too short." I ignored her and marched to the den. Marcus sat at his computer, spreadsheets glowing on the screen. "Dad," he sighed, "we already talked about this." "No," I snapped. My voice startled even me. "We didn't talk. You talked. You justified. But you didn't listen. You didn't explain why you would bury me in debt after everything I've done for you." He turned, his expression cold. "You don't get it. This is bigger than you. Sierra and I are building a future. Investments, businesses, opportunities you wouldn't understand. You're old school, Dad. You play it safe. But safe doesn't make millionaires." I stared at him, my chest tight. I never wanted to be a millionaire. I just wanted to live honest. I wanted you to live honest. He rolled his eyes. "Times have changed. You're stuck in the past. The past. The past where I worked double shifts so he could have new sneakers. The past where I skipped meals so he could have lunch money. The past where I promised his dying mother I'd raise him right. If that was the past, then what future was left for me? I walked out of the house without another word. That night, back in my recliner, I realized something. Marcus had chosen his path. He had chosen Sierra, chosen greed, chosen shortcuts. I couldn't change him. But I could decide what kind of man I would be in the face of his betrayal. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of clarity. I wasn't going to roll over. I wasn't going to let them strip me of my dignity, my home, my name. The son I raised was gone. The man standing in his place had to face consequences. The only question now was, how? Because if Marcus thought I was too old, too weak, or too naive to fight back, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The morning after my second confrontation with Marcus, I woke with a strange calm. The kind of calm a man feels after a storm has wrecked his home, when he realizes standing in the rubble that he's still breathing. My world was torn apart, yes. My bank account empty, my name stained. But I was still here. And if I was still here, I could fight. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table with Elaine's mug, and started writing. Not a plan yet, just thoughts, memories, scraps of anger and clarity scribbled on lined paper. Don't beg. Don't fold. Use their greed. I wrote the words 3 times, underlined them until the pen tore through the page. My first step was information. If Marcus and Sierra could forge papers in my name, what else could they do? How deep did the hole go? I dug through my filing cabinet. Social Security letters, pension statements, tax returns. I made copies of everything. Then I drove to the local bank branch. The teller, a kind woman named Julie who'd known me for years, frowned as I explained what happened. "Harold, I'll get the manager," she whispered, her hand touching mine like I was family. Minutes later, I sat across from Mr. Peterson, a man I'd shaken hands with at church potlucks. "They forged my name," I said, sliding the foreclosure notice across his desk. $500,000. I didn't sign a thing. His face tightened. He adjusted his glasses, studied the papers. "Mr. Whitman, I believe you. But this is complicated. Fraud cases take time. You'll need legal counsel." "I don't have money for lawyers," I said bitterly. "Then find one who'll take it on contingency," he said gently. "If fraud is proven, the liability falls on the perpetrators, not you. But it won't be easy. Especially if your son is involved." That word, son, stabbed like a knife. I clenched my fists until my nails dug crescents into my palms. "Where do I start?" I asked. He slid me a business card. "Thomas Bailey, local attorney. He's tough, and he owes me a favor. Tell him I sent you." I left the bank with the card burning in my pocket. My first weapon. Driving home, I thought about Elaine. About the promise I made at her bedside, when the cancer had hollowed her cheeks but her eyes still burned with love. "Take care of him," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "Make him good." I had tried. God knows I had tried. But now Marcus was no longer just my son. He was my enemy. And that realization nearly broke me. Back at home, I couldn't sit still. I wandered into the garage, stared at the old workbench. A memory hit me so hard I had to grip the edge of the table. Marcus at 10 years old, standing beside me, holding a screwdriver upside down. "Like this, Dad?" he asked. I laughed back then, corrected his grip, guided his hand until he got it right. "There you go, son. Now you'll never forget." And he hadn't. Only instead of fixing things, he'd learned to break them. I shook off the memory. Regret wouldn't save me now. Action would. That evening, I dialed the number on the business card. After 2 rings, a gruff voice answered. "Bailey." I introduced myself, explained the situation. He listened without interrupting, then said, "Come tomorrow. Bring every document you've got. If you're telling the truth, we'll make your son and his wife regret they ever thought you were weak." Those words, "we'll make them regret," lit a fire inside me. For the first time, I wasn't alone. The next day, I sat in Bailey's office, papers spread across his oak desk. He was in his late 50s, barrel-chested, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. As he examined the forged signatures, he grunted. Sloppy work. Notary stamps fake. Signatures don't match. This'll hold up in court, no question. So I'm free? I asked. He leaned back, folding his hands. Not yet. The bank doesn't care who's guilty. They just want their money. Until the case is resolved, they'll keep pressuring you. And if your son has already burned through the loan, collecting from him will be like squeezing water from a stone. I swallowed hard. Then what do I do? You play smart. Don't confront them again. Don't tip your hand. Let them think you're beaten while we build the case. And Harold, document everything. Every phone call, every text, every word they say. Greedy people always slip up. I nodded. Quiet, steady. That I could do. On my drive home, I felt something strange. Hope. Small, fragile, but real. That night, I pulled out one of Elaine's old notebooks, the kind she used for grocery lists and church notes. I labeled the first page, The Whitman File. Underneath, I wrote the date and began recording everything I could remember. Marcus's dismissive tone. Sierra's smug words. Darlene's wine-soaked smirk. Every detail mattered now. Days turned into weeks. The bank's letters piled higher. My pension barely covered utilities and food. I canceled cable, skipped doctor visits, stretched every dollar. Neighbors noticed me tightening my belt. I told them I was fine. But at night, I stared at the foreclosure notice and whispered to Elaine's photograph, I'm not fine. But I will be. One afternoon, as I mowed the lawn, I saw Sierra's SUV glide down the street. She slowed, rolled down the window, and called out, Nice grass, Harold. Shame if the bank takes it. Her laugh echoed as she sped away. I gripped the mower handle until my knuckles turned white. That laugh would haunt me, but it also fueled me. Later that evening, I added a new line to the Whitman file. Sierra taunted me in front of the house. No shame. No fear. Record this. Each entry felt like a brick in a wall I was building. A wall of truth, meant to trap them in their own lies. Still, nights were the hardest. The loneliness pressed on me like a weight. I found myself talking to Elaine's photo more often. Would you forgive him? I asked her once. Would you forgive me if I didn't? Her silent smile gave no answer. One night, unable to sleep, I drove to Marcus's neighborhood. Parked a block away. Watched their house from the shadows. Music blared inside. Laughter spilled out. Through the windows I saw Sierra twirling in a new dress, Marcus pouring champagne, Darlene clapping like a queen in her castle. It made me sick. My son lived in luxury while I ate canned soup by candlelight to save on electricity. I almost knocked on the door that night. Almost stormed in, demanded justice. But Bailey's words echoed in my head. Don't tip your hand. So I stayed in the shadows. Watching. Waiting. As I drove away, a new thought took root in my mind. Maybe it wasn't enough to win in court. Maybe I needed to teach them a lesson no gavel could deliver. Something deeper. Something they'd never forget. That thought scared me. But it also thrilled me. When I got home, I added another line to the Whitman file. They think I am weak. They think I am finished. Let them believe it. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and whispered into the dark, The war has begun. The war had begun, but it didn't feel like a war at first. It felt like silence. Like waiting for a storm to arrive while the sky pretends it's clear. The bank kept sending letters, each one colder than the last. Marcus and Sierra lived in luxury, smug as ever. I played the part of the broken old man. It was harder than I thought. Some days, I woke up ready to fight, fists clenched, mind sharp. Other days, the weight of betrayal nearly crushed me. I'd stare at Elaine's picture on the mantel and whisper, I don't know if I can do this without you. But then Sierra would call. Not to apologize. Oh no. To gloat. Harold, she purred over the phone one afternoon, Marcus and I are hosting a little get-together this weekend. You should come by. It'll be nice for you to see what your investment bought us. Her laughter cut like glass. I clenched the receiver, forced my voice to stay calm. Sure, Sierra. I'll come. I wrote it down in the Whitman file. She thinks she's untouchable. That weekend, I showed up at their house with a bottle of cheap wine from the corner store. The place was lit up like a palace. Cars lined the driveway, BMWs, Lexuses, a Tesla humming quietly. Inside, people mingled with champagne flutes, talking about stocks, vacations, and business deals. I stuck out like a sore thumb in my old blazer, but that was fine. I wanted to stick out. Marcus greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dad, glad you made it." Sierra floated over, glittering in a silver dress. "Isn't this wonderful?" she said, gesturing to the crowd. "We're really building something here. Your sacrifice wasn't in vain." Sacrifice. She said it like I'd willingly laid my future on the altar of her vanity. I smiled faintly. "Looks like you're doing well." She leaned in close, her perfume suffocating. "And this is only the beginning." That night, I didn't drink. I observed. I watched how Sierra flitted from guest to guest, bragging about Marcus's new startup and their family investments. I noticed how she bragged about a boutique opening soon, one she called her dream. A boutique. Expensive. Risky. A perfect weakness. I scribbled notes in the bathroom, hiding in the stall like a spy. Boutique opening. Vanity project. Leverage. When the party wound down, Marcus caught me by the door. His eyes softened for a second, like the boy I once knew was peeking out. "Dad, I know you're upset, but this is for the best. You'll see one day." I wanted to shake him, to scream, but instead, I just patted his shoulder. "Take care, son." Driving home, I replayed every detail in my head. Sierra's greed, Marcus's blindness, their carelessness, and slowly, a plan began to form. The next week, I met with Bailey again. Spread my notes across his desk like evidence in a trial. "They're sloppy," he muttered, flipping through. "They've left a trail wide as a highway." "I need more than legal victory," I said, my voice low. "I need them to feel it." Bailey studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Sometimes justice needs a personal touch." That night, I couldn't sleep. My house was too quiet. I wandered into the garage, sat on the old workbench, and let memories flood me. Elaine sitting on that bench, pregnant belly round, laughing as I tried to assemble a crib with the wrong screws. Marcus, at 8, hammering nails into scrap wood while I pretended his crooked birdhouse was a masterpiece. I had built this family with my hands. And now those same hands trembled with rage. But rage alone wouldn't win. I needed precision. The next day, I started gathering allies. First was Agnes, my nosy neighbor. She saw everything on our street. I invited her over for coffee and casually asked if she'd noticed Sierra's visits. Her eyes lit up. "That girl, Harold, she drives by every other day. Stares at your house like she owns it. And last week, I saw her loading boxes into her SUV. Fancy clothes, looked like inventory. Perfect. Inventory for her boutique." Next was Julie, the bank teller. She couldn't break confidentiality, but she hinted at Sierra applying for business-related credit. I thanked her, tucked the knowledge away. Piece by piece, I built my puzzle. Sierra's boutique wasn't just a vanity project, it was a lifeline. If I could tug on that thread, the whole tapestry might unravel. Meanwhile, the bank's pressure mounted. Letters turned into phone calls. Calls turned into threats. "We'll begin foreclosure proceedings in 60 days. I felt my chest tighten each time. At night, I lay awake listening to the old house creak, wondering if soon strangers would walk its halls, tearing apart the life Elaine and I built. But then I'd open the Whitman file, read my notes, and remind myself I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. One evening, I got a call from Marcus. His voice was strained, almost desperate. "Dad, listen. Sierra's boutique is opening in a month. We're stretched thin. Could you, just a little more help? A loan, maybe?" I almost laughed. After everything, he still saw me as a wallet. "No, Marcus," I said calmly. "I don't have anything left to give." There was a pause. Then his voice hardened. "You're being selfish. This is about family." I hung up without another word. But I wrote it down. Marcus called. Desperate. Cracks forming. Weeks passed. I played the role of the tired old man. Paid bills late. Let my lawn grow wild. Acted beaten. All while watching, recording, waiting. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Sierra called, frantic. Harold, she snapped, the bank's dragging its feet with my boutique loan. They're asking questions. About you. About the house. Did you tell them anything? I smiled to myself. Just the truth, Sierra. That I never signed a thing. Her silence was sharp. Then she hissed, "Don't you dare ruin this for me." Click. I wrote it down. Word for word. Proof that she knew. Proof that she was guilty. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the Whitman file. Pages of notes, evidence, memories. A map of betrayal and greed. And for the first time, I saw the shape of victory. Not just survival. Not just clearing my name. But turning the very trap they set for me into their downfall. I picked up the phone, called Bailey, and said, "It's time." But even as I hung up, I knew this was only the beginning. Because winning legally wasn't enough. I wanted Marcus to see. I wanted Sierra to break. I wanted them both to understand what it meant to betray a Whitman. The war was no longer quiet. And when the first strike landed, they would never see it coming. The day I chose to fight back started like any other. Gray sky, black coffee, silence heavy enough to choke me. But inside, I was no longer the man staring helplessly at foreclosure letters. I was something else. A soldier in a war my son and his wife thought I was too old to fight. Bailey, my lawyer, called me that morning. "I filed the fraud claim," he said, his voice steady. "The bank won't back off yet, but the clock's ticking. We need leverage, Harold, something that forces them to see you as the victim, not the debtor." Leverage. That word stuck with me. After we hung up, I stared at the Whitman file spread across my kitchen table. Pages of Sierra's arrogance, Marcus's desperation, Darlene's smug indulgence. But one page in particular caught my eye, the note about Sierra's boutique. That boutique was more than her dream. It was her lifeline, her proof to the world that she was someone. If I tugged on that thread, everything could unravel. I drove to downtown Indianapolis where the boutique was under construction. The storefront glittered with promise, Sierra Luxe. Gold letters stenciled across the glass, mannequins draped in overpriced gowns, contractors hammering inside. I stood across the street, unnoticed, and watched Sierra bark orders at a young worker. She wore sunglasses the size of teacups and carried a clipboard she didn't know how to use. It was a vanity project, yes, but it was also a liability. That evening, I stopped by the county clerk's office. Public records are open to anyone with patience, and I had plenty. It didn't take long to find what I suspected. Sierra had signed contracts in her own name, backed by Marcus's salary and, most importantly, the loan stolen in mine. No backup funds. No cushion. If the boutique failed, so did they. That was my leverage. The next step was timing. I couldn't just expose her. I had to wait until the blow would be fatal, not just bruising. A week later, an invitation arrived in the mail. Cream cardstock, gold lettering, asterisk, "You are cordially invited to the grand opening of Sierra Luxe Boutique. A celebration of style, success, and family." Asterisk. Family. The word stung. I held the invitation over the trash can, ready to rip it apart. But then I stopped. This wasn't just a party. It was a stage. A stage where Sierra would brag, Marcus would beam, and the world would applaud. And it was where I would strike. The days leading up to the opening were suffocating. The bank called daily. Neighbors whispered. Agnes asked if I'd be all right. I told her I was fine. Inside, I felt like a man walking a tightrope with fire beneath him. The morning of the opening, I put on my best suit, the same one I wore to Marcus's wedding, back when hope still lived in my chest. I polished my shoes until the leather shone. Looked at Elaine's photo one last time. "This is for us," I whispered. "Not for revenge. For justice." The boutique sparkled like a jewel when I arrived. Music played, champagne flowed, photographers snapped pictures of Sierra posing at the ribbon. Marcus stood beside her, nervous but proud, as if he had built the empire himself. When Sierra saw me, her smile froze for a second, then stretched wider. Well, Harold came. I wasn't sure you'd show. Isn't this fabulous? I smiled back. It's something, all right. As the ceremony began, Sierra gave a speech dripping with self-praise. This boutique represents not just fashion, but family, she declared, clutching Marcus's hand. It's built on trust, sacrifice, and love. Sacrifice. The word stabbed me again, but I kept smiling. Because I knew what was about to happen. Halfway through the evening, when the crowd was thick and the champagne was flowing, I slipped out my phone. I had prepared for this moment, recorded every incriminating word Sierra had thrown at me over the phone. With Bailey's help, I'd even drafted a statement for the press. I caught the eye of a local reporter I knew from church, young woman named Tessa, who owed me a favor after I fixed her fence last summer. She was covering the opening for the paper. I handed her a flash drive. "What's this?" she whispered. "Proof," I said simply. "Proof that this whole empire is built on fraud. Check it before you print. It's all real." Her eyes widened, but she slipped it into her bag without a word. The rest of the night, I stayed quiet. Smiled, nodded, let Sierra think she had won. She even toasted me at one point, raising her glass. "To Harold," she said sweetly, "for believing in us when no one else did." I raised my glass too, though mine was filled with water. Inside, I felt like the floor was cracking beneath them already. The next morning, it happened. The story broke in the Indianapolis Star, boutique funded by fraudulent loan, elderly father victimized by son and daughter-in-law. The article detailed everything, how my name had been forged, how Sierra taunted me, how Marcus ignored my pleas. Tessa included quotes from Bailey, who confirmed the legal case. And she even published snippets of Sierra's recorded threats. "Don't you dare ruin this for me." The fallout was immediate. Sierra Luxe Boutique went from glamorous debut to public scandal overnight. The bank froze their accounts. Contractors walked off the job. Guests who toasted them last night refused to return calls. And Marcus called me. "Dad," he said, his voice shaking, "how could you do this? How could I?" I snapped. "You stole my name. You stole my life. All I did was tell the truth." He was silent. I could hear Sierra yelling in the background, furious, blaming him. "Dad," he whispered finally, "we're ruined." For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the foreclosure notice. Elaine's picture. Sierra's laugh as she mocked my lawn. "You did this to yourself, son," I said quietly. "And now you'll live with it." I hung up. That evening, I sat on my porch as the sun set, the newspaper folded beside me. Agnes came by, holding a pie. "I saw the news," she said softly. "You did the right thing, Harold." I nodded, though inside I wasn't sure. Did justice ever feel this heavy? As night fell, I walked inside, stared at the Whitman file. Pages of evidence, now complete. The first strike had landed, and it had been devastating. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Marcus and Sierra weren't the kind to go quietly. They would fight, claw, and scheme. And when they did, I had to be ready. Because wars aren't won in one battle. And the next round was coming. When you've spent your whole life giving, fighting back feels unnatural. I thought exposing Sierra's boutique would bring relief, maybe even closure. Instead, it brought silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that crept through my house, my porch, even the diner where I sometimes sat with Agnes. The paper had called me brave. Neighbors whispered that I was finally standing up for myself. But late at night, when I sat in Elaine's chair with only the clock ticking, all I felt was doubt. I had destroyed my son's life in one stroke. Had I also destroyed whatever was left of his soul? 3 days after the story broke, the silence shattered. Marcus showed up on my porch. He didn't knock, he stormed. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept. "Dad!" he barked, shoving the screen door open. "What the hell did you do?" I set down my coffee. "You already know. You embarrassed me," he spat. "You humiliated Sierra in front of the whole city. You've ruined everything." I studied him, this man I once carried on my shoulders after Little League games. Now he was a stranger with anger carved into his face. No, Marcus. You ruined everything. I just stopped you from burying me deeper. He laughed bitterly. You think this makes you some kind of hero? You think people are cheering for you? They're laughing at us. They're laughing at me. His voice cracked on that last word, and for a second, I saw the boy he used to be, afraid of failure, desperate for approval. But Sierra's shadow loomed behind him. Even when she wasn't there, I could feel her hand pulling his strings. She put you up to this visit, didn't she? I asked quietly. Marcus's jaw tightened. We just want you to retract your statement. Call the paper. Tell them you were confused. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. My stomach turned. A misunderstanding? You forged my signature. You dragged my name through mud. And now you want me to lie so she can keep her boutique alive. His eyes flickered. He didn't answer, which told me everything. Dad, he said finally, softer this time. Please. We're drowning. Sierra's mother moved in with us after the story. The bank's on us every hour. People look at us like criminals. If you don't fix this, I don't know what'll happen. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the armrest. Son, I can't fix it. Because I didn't break it. You did. The silence between us stretched thin as glass. Finally, Marcus stood. His face was pale, his fists trembling. You'll regret this, he muttered. You think you've won, but you haven't. Sierra doesn't lose. And neither do I. He slammed the door behind him. That night, the war turned ugly. The first attack came in the form of phone calls. Anonymous numbers, late at night. I'd pick up, and silence would hang heavy, followed by a click. Once, I heard muffled laughter. Another time, just breathing. Then came the whispers in town. At the grocery store, a woman from church avoided my eyes. At the diner, two men at the counter muttered, "Traitor," under their breath. I realized Sierra had started her own campaign, a smear against me, painting me as a bitter old man who couldn't stand his son's success. Agnes noticed. She came over one afternoon with her hands on her hips. They're trying to turn people against you, she said. Don't you let them. But it wasn't just the town. Sierra and Marcus filed a countersuit. Bailey called me one morning, his voice tight. They're claiming you're mentally unstable, Harold. That you fabricated the recordings. They want the court to declare you unfit to handle your finances. Unfit. The word sliced me deeper than any insult. I had worked my whole life to stand tall, to provide, to never be a burden. Now my own son was using my age as a weapon. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the dark fields beyond my yard. The crickets chirped, the air was heavy, and I felt Elaine's absence like a hollow in my chest. I whispered into the night, "Am I really losing my mind?" But deep down, I knew the truth. Sierra was cornered, and cornered people bite. 2 days later, they escalated. I came home from the pharmacy to find my mailbox stuffed with flyers. Bold red letters screamed, "Asterisk, don't trust Harold Whitman, a bitter old man destroying his own family." Asterisk photos of Marcus and Sierra smiling were plastered on the page, with captions painting them as victims of elder paranoia. Neighbors found them in their mailboxes too. One even showed up on the church bulletin board before Pastor Rick tore it down. I wanted to crawl into a hole. Instead, I gathered every flyer, every cruel word, and placed them in the Whitman file. Proof. Evidence. But the weight was crushing me. My hands shook when I wrote checks. My chest tightened when the phone rang. One night, I collapsed on the living room floor, gasping, certain it was a heart attack. Agnes rushed me to the ER, and after hours of tests, the doctor said it was stress. Pure, unrelenting stress. Your body can't keep carrying this load, he warned. You need rest. Peace. Peace. The word felt like a foreign language. Back home, I sat in the quiet and thought about giving up. Calling Bailey, telling him to drop the case. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe I was too old for this war. But then I opened the drawer beside my recliner and pulled out the photo. Marcus at 10 years old, holding up his first fishing rod, smiling like the world was his. Elaine beside him, her hand on his shoulder, her eyes shining with pride. They deserved better. She deserved better. And if I let Sierra win, if I let Marcus sink deeper into her poison, then her death would mean nothing. So I made a choice. I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't back down. I'd fight, even if it broke me. Because the only thing worse than dying was letting my son believe betrayal carried no cost. The next morning, I called Bailey. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled. If they want war, I told him, then war is what they'll get. And as I hung up, I realized something. Sierra thought she had seen the worst of me. But she hadn't seen what a desperate old man, with nothing left to lose, was truly capable of. The counterattack had begun. And this time, I wasn't playing defense. I was going to strike harder. Much harder. For weeks the city hummed with gossip. For weeks I sat in my kitchen and listened to it like a man waiting for a train to come that would finally take him somewhere new. People whispered in grocery aisles. Reporters sent messages. Marcus's face was in more newspapers than mine, and every new headline felt like a knife twisting. I knew they would come back swinging. I also knew that if I wanted them to break, I had to break them cleanly, in a way that would show the world the truth and leave nothing for them to twist. I started small, the way you warm a pan before you fry something. Bailey and I met in his office at dawn, the light through the blinds making the papers on his desk look like rows of tombstones. He had already filed the fraud claim, but the prosecutor needed something stronger than a civil case if he wanted charges. Criminal charges. Forgery. Identity theft. Those would be the kind of blows that could not be erased with a press conference or a friendly lawyer. You got recordings, Bailey said, tapping the flash drive I had handed him months before. You got witnesses who can say Sierra bragged about the loan and Marcus signed it. But for a prosecutor to take this, we need a paper trail that ties the money to their accounts and not to some shell company. We need bank transfers, contractor invoices, vendor contracts. We need the boutique supply chain. We need them naked on paper. I nodded. Naked on paper. I liked the sound of that, and I liked the image even more. It felt like truth. It felt like the kind of clean thing my hands had built in my younger days, when a crooked board could be sanded flat until it matched the rest. I went to work. My first stop was the county clerk again, but this time I had a new friend with me. Tessa, the reporter who had broken the first story, had been quiet since the scandal. She said she owed me one and wanted to know more. The two of us sat with a stack of public records and made phone calls. Tessa used reporter's charm. I used the quiet Mr. Whitman thing I had perfected. Between us, we found a vendor who had been paid in cash by Sierra's front company. We found an invoice with an address that matched Darlene's mailbox. We found purchase orders for gowns that were paid by a corporate account opened last month, with signatories listed as Sierra Lux, LLC, and Marcus Whitman. The money trail began to stitch itself into a rope I could drag across the room. It was the rope that did it. Bailey took a stack of subpoenas to the boutique's accountant. The accountant, a jittery man with bad coffee breath, folded when Bailey mentioned jail time for aiding and abetting fraud. He handed over spreadsheets and bank statements with hands that trembled like a child's. The paper trail showed transfers from the loan account straight into Sierra Lux, LLC, then out again into 100 petty payments labeled consulting or inventory purchase that ended up in the accounts of friends, in shell companies, in the bank account of an art dealer in Carmel who loved expensive champagne and had a taste for gray money. The money had a pattern. It had fingerprints. Every new file, every transfer, every signature that didn't match my own, I added to the Whitman file. The file was no longer a stack of notes. It was a dossier. It smelled of old paper and revenge, and when I opened it, I felt the way a man feels when he opens a long-locked door to a room where the lights finally turn on. We played it smart. Bailey handed the prosecutor the dossier and told him we would sit on it for now, give them time to consider charges. Meanwhile, we fed the press quiet morsels, verified facts, not gossip, so the story stayed in public view. Tessa ran pieces about the contractors who had gone unpaid, about the boutique suppliers who claimed they had been hoodwinked with bad checks. Friends of Sierra started getting nervous. The art dealer who had taken one of the consulting payments was suddenly receiving subpoenas. That man was not glamorous in the way TV makes them. He was small and afraid, and he talked. Once he talked, more doors opened. They were beginning to panic. I could tell from the calls that reached my phone. Marcus called in the middle of the night, voice raw. "Dad, please. If this goes to the feds, it's over. We'll lose everything. We'll lose the house. Please." I didn't say a word at first. I listened. He babbled about plans to sell assets, about finding investors, about pulling the boutique offline. It was all panic dressed as strategy. "Sell now," I said finally, and my voice was calm. "Then sign over whatever you have left to me. Pay the bank back. Make it right." There was a long silence. In that silence I heard desperation turn to calculation. "You're giving us a way out," he said. "A ladder." "No," I said. "I'm giving you a consequence." That shook him. He hung up. Sierra, of course, did not call directly. She sent Darlene with a flowered hat and a bottle of that cheap sparkling wine she pretended was vintage. Darlene sat in my kitchen like a queen in exile and talked at me as if I'd started a neighborhood quarrel and she was a diplomat called to negotiate. She complained about the humiliation, about how the city had been unfair. Her words were syrup-thin and sickly sweet. I listened and wrote down everything she said. Her name was on invoices. Her hand touched envelopes that bore the boutique's logo. She was not as distant as she pretended to be. The community began to shift. Small business owners whispered about lost contracts. The church ladies who had once avoided my eyes now nodded, then hurried off to check their inboxes. People get nervous when money smells like trouble. They get mean when they worry they might have trusted a house built on someone else's foundation. Friendships fray. Alliances shift. Greed is a brittle thing. The turning point came on a Tuesday. I was sitting at my table, coffee gone cold, when Bailey walked in with a file thicker than any before. "They wired money to an offshore supplier 2 days before the boutique opened," he said. "That's tax evasion territory if it's intentionally concealed. Prosecutor wants to interview them. He's ready to move." I felt my knees go weak for a second, like a man who sways on a ladder and wonders if the rungs will hold. I had expected satisfaction, not fear. But fear felt righteous now. Fear felt like duty. We set the trap. Bailey worked with the prosecutor to get search warrants. They coordinated with the bank's fraud unit. The feds were involved now, and when the feds get involved, even the proudest fall quickly. The next morning, the police came to Marcus and Sierra early. I didn't watch. I sat on the porch and listened to the distant thrum of boots and a voice I recognized. A neighbor yelling that the cops were at their house. I felt nothing and everything at once. A cold clarity settled into my chest. The world was a circle and every action had to land straight at the center. Later that day, the knock came at my door. It wasn't the police. It was Pastor Rick. His face had the look of a man who carries the weight of a congregation and also feels its judgment. He stood there, hands clasped, voice low. "Harold," he said, "a lot of folks are talking. Some say you went too far. Are you sure this is justice?" I studied him. I'd baptized 2 of his children. I'd mended his fence. He looked smaller than he used to. I felt something like pity move across me, but it was replaced by resolve. "Pastor," I said, "if there is a truth, it needs to be told. I did not set out to destroy them. I set out to protect what's mine and what was promised to me. If there are consequences, let them be theirs." He nodded, though I could see the doubt linger. By evening, the news had spread. The boutique's doors were padlocked by the sheriff. Contractors arrived to collect what they were owed. The bank placed liens and froze accounts. The man from Carmel had been questioned. Darlene's name appeared on documents I had found earlier. Marcus and Sierra were under investigation. The city had little patience for the kind of greed that used old names and stole futures. My phone rang later that night. It was Marcus. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He sounded small. "Dad, I need help," he said. "They want to charge us. I don't know what to do." There was a part of me that wanted to pick up the car and drive to him, to put a hand on his shoulder like I used to tell him that everything would be all right. There was also the man who had spent months awake, who had counted the ways his son had taken and lied and pretended. Both men lived in me, but the one who had kept the Whitman name clean won out. You take responsibility, I said. You tell the truth. You cooperate. No more lies. He swallowed, a sound I could almost hear through the line. Okay, he said finally. Okay. I hung up and sat very still. The house felt too loud. The photographs seemed to lean toward me. Elaine's smile was patient and sad. I realized then that justice, even when clean, rarely feels like triumph. It feels like work you do because it's right, not because it soothes you. It leaves scars on everyone involved. Marcus would scar. Sierra would scar. So would I. The next morning, I read the paper cover to cover. The headline was blunt. Sierra Lux under investigation. The article painted them in stark lines. The borrowed name, the missing funds, the men who would not take the stand. Townspeople queued to give statements. A contractor who had once laughed at me now signed an affidavit I had helped organize. That night, as dusk bled into dark, I heard a car pull up outside. The tires hummed in the gravel. Footsteps crossed the porch. I kept the light off. My heart beat against my ribs so loudly I thought someone might hear it through the walls. A silhouette appeared at the door. Not Marcus. Not a cop. Someone else. The figure raised a hand and knocked once. Slow. Deliberate. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. What I saw made my throat go dry. The knock at my door that night was slow, deliberate, and heavy, as if whoever stood outside carried the weight of a confession. My pulse thudded in my ears as I shuffled across the floor and peered through the peephole. It wasn't Sierra. It wasn't Darlene. It wasn't the police. It was Marcus. He stood there with his hands stuffed deep in his coat pockets, his shoulders hunched, his face drawn in a way I'd never seen before. He looked like a man decades older than his 35 years, like the life had been drained out of him. For a long moment, I considered leaving him out there. Let him stand in the dark, just as I had been left alone in mine. But something deep inside, call it fatherhood, call it pity, unlocked my hand and turned the knob. "Dad," he whispered. The word cracked me open. "Come in," I said, though my voice carried no warmth. He stepped inside, glancing around the house as if it were foreign territory. His eyes lingered on Elaine's photograph on the mantel, the one of her holding him as a baby. For a moment, I thought he might collapse right there on the rug. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where months ago I had stared at foreclosure papers. Now the table was bare, save for Elaine's faded coffee mug and the Whitman file stacked neatly at the end. "I don't know where to start," Marcus muttered, his fingers twitching. "Everything's falling apart. She's gone." I raised an eyebrow. "Gone?" "She left. Packed her things, took her mother, and said she wasn't sticking around to be dragged down. Said I was useless if I couldn't protect her." His voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw raw pain cut through his arrogance. I said nothing. He leaned forward, his eyes red. "Dad, I'm going to prison. They've got everything. Bailey's file, the transfers, the recordings, they've got it all. The prosecutor says if I cooperate, maybe I'll get less time. But Sierra, she's vanished. They'll never find her." "Then you'll face it alone," I said quietly. Marcus slammed his fist against the table. "Don't you get it? I did it for her. All of it. The loan, the boutique, the lies, everything was for her. I wanted her to see me as something more than the man who couldn't afford her world. I wanted you to be proud too. I wanted everyone to believe I was someone." The words hung in the air like smoke. I swallowed hard. "Marcus, I was proud the day you were born. I was proud when you rode your first bike, when you made honor roll, when you called me after your first job. But I never asked you to buy my pride. You traded it away yourself, chasing someone who didn't care whether you lived or died." He buried his face in his hands. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of Elaine, her gentle way of smoothing over arguments, her voice telling me that no one is beyond saving. Then I thought of the lies, the forged documents, the nights of harassment, the flyers calling me bitter and senile. "You broke it," I said finally. "But maybe, just maybe, you can still fix yourself." For the first time in months, Marcus wept. Not the angry tears he had thrown at me before, but the heavy sobs of a boy who had finally realized he was lost. I sat across from him, my hands folded, and let him cry. I didn't reach out. Not yet. Hours passed. He told me everything, how Sierra had pushed him, how Darlene had dangled promises of investors, how the boutique had never been about fashion but about image, about climbing into a world that would never accept them. He admitted to forging my name, to watching me crumble, and doing nothing. His words were knives, but knives cut truth too. When dawn broke, he looked like a man stripped bare. "I'm turning myself in," he said quietly. "The prosecutor said if I come clean, it'll help. Dad, will you be there?" I looked at him for a long moment. "I'll be in the courtroom," I said. "Not for you. Not for Sierra. For me. For Elaine. For the truth." He nodded, tears streaking his face. "That's enough." And then he left. The weeks that followed felt like the last pages of a book I wasn't sure I wanted to finish. Sierra had vanished, likely skipping town with whatever scraps of money she could grab. Darlene's name was tied to enough invoices that she couldn't hide, and the IRS had questions she couldn't answer. But Marcus stood trial. I sat in the courtroom, my suit pressed, my cane steady by my side. When Marcus entered in shackles, my chest tightened, but I didn't look away. He pleaded guilty to fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The judge, stern but not unkind, sentenced him to years in prison, with the possibility of parole if he kept his nose clean. When the gavel came down, Marcus turned his head. Our eyes met across the room. His lips moved. "I'm sorry." I gave a single nod. It was all I had left to give. Afterward, the prosecutor shook my hand. "You did the right thing, Mr. Whitman. You stopped them before they could hurt anyone else." But the truth is, I hadn't done it to stop them. I had done it to save myself, from debt, from shame, from being erased by the very people I had raised. That night, I sat on my porch as the sun sank low, the cicadas buzzing, the sky painted orange and purple. Agnes joined me, her hand resting gently on mine. "It's over now," she said softly. "Is it?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "Maybe not for Marcus. But for you, it can be." I stared at the horizon. For the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. Not joy, not triumph, but peace. Quiet, hard-earned peace. I had lost my son to greed, then found him again in confession. I had lost my reputation, then rebuilt it in truth. I had lost years to silence, but in the end, my voice had carried. The world had not given me a happy ending, but it had given me something better. A last word. And in that word, I found myself again. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.